I was 34 years old, kneeling on a hotel room floor at 3 in the morning, when God showed me her face, my housekeeper's daughter, the girl I'd known since she was 16. In that vision, she was holding our baby, wearing my ring, and I knew this was either the answer to my prayers or the biggest mistake of my life. My phone buzzed. It was her. "I can't sleep. I miss you." My hands were shaking as I typed back, knowing that when I returned home the next day, everything would change forever.
Story based on true events. Names, locations, and some facts have been altered to preserve the privacy of those involved.
What I didn't know was that at that exact moment, 3 a.m., she was dreaming of her mother, my mother's housekeeper who had passed away, receiving the same message I had just received. But from the other side, they say you can't choose who you fall in love with. But I never believed that until I found myself staring at Grace Martinez across my living room, watching her laugh at something on her phone, completely unaware that my entire world had just shifted on its axis. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this impossible story really began, because what happened between us defied every rule I'd ever known about love, faith, and the courage it takes to follow your heart when the whole world is watching. It was a muggy August afternoon in Atlanta when my mother took her final breath. Eleanor Richardson had been the pillar of our family, the kind of woman who kept fresh flowers on the dining table even when money was tight, who never missed a Sunday service, and who treated everyone, from the mayor to the mailman, with the same gentle respect. For 23 years, Rosa Martinez had worked in my mother's home, and over time she'd become more than an employee. She'd become family. I still remember Rosa arriving at our doorstep when I was 7 years old, her English broken, but her smile warm, carrying a small girl on her hip. That little girl was Grace, barely walking, with dark curls that bounced when she moved and eyes that seemed too big for her tiny face. Rosa had fled from a terrible situation in Alabama, a husband whose demons lived at the bottom of whiskey bottles, whose hands knew violence better than tenderness. My mother, without hesitation, had offered her sanctuary, a job, a chance. The day we buried my mother, I was 30 years old, married to a woman named Jennifer, and father to a 6-year-old boy named Tyler. I stood at that graveside in my black suit, feeling the Georgia heat press down on my shoulders like a physical weight, and I watched Rosa sob uncontrollably. Grace, then 16, held her mother with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so young. She didn't cry. She just stood there, solid as stone, being the support her mother needed. "What will we do?" Rosa asked me after the service, her voice small and afraid. "Where will we go?" I didn't even have to think about it. "You'll stay," I told her. "You'll come work for me, both of you. Mom would want that." Jennifer wasn't thrilled. She'd been hinting about wanting to hire someone younger, someone with better English, but she didn't argue. Not then. We lived in a comfortable house in Buckhead, the kind of neighborhood where people hired landscapers and personal trainers, where appearances mattered more than authenticity. Rosa and Grace moved into the small apartment above our garage. Grace was shy, quiet, still carrying that Alabama accent that made the kids at her new high school mock her relentlessly. I barely noticed her that first year. I was drowning in casework at the law firm, trying to make partner, navigating the increasingly cold distance that had grown between Jennifer and me. We'd become roommates who occasionally argued, our marriage a performance we put on for Tyler's sake and for our parents' annual Christmas card. Then life dealt another crushing blow. 1 year after my mother's passing, Rosa suffered a massive stroke while folding laundry in our guest room. Grace found her collapsed on the floor, still clutching one of Tyler's small shirts in her rigid fingers. I'll never forget the sound of Grace's scream, the way it seemed to tear through the walls of the house. We rushed Rosa to Emory University Hospital, where machines beeped their clinical symphonies and doctors spoke in careful, measured tones about brain damage and quality of life. 5 days later, Rosa joined my mother. Grace was 17 years old and completely alone in the world. I found her in the hospital chapel, sitting in the front pew with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the simple wooden cross on the wall. No tears. Just that same stone-solid composure I'd seen at my mother's funeral. But when I sat down beside her and put my hand on her shoulder, she finally broke. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No family. Nothing. You have me," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. You can stay. Keep working at the house. I'll make sure you're taken care of. That's what your mom would want. That's what my mom would want." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Gratitude mixed with something I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe, or hope. Grace continued living above our garage, taking over her mother's duties. She was meticulous, almost obsessive about keeping everything perfect. She learned my coffee preferences, remembered that Tyler was allergic to strawberries, even figured out that Jennifer preferred her morning smoothie with exactly half a banana, no more, no less. A year passed. Grace turned 18. And then my marriage finally shattered. I'd known for months that something was wrong, but I'd been too proud or too scared to confront it. Jennifer started working late more often, her phone constantly buzzing with messages she'd quickly hide. She became irritable, distant, finding fault with everything I did. When I tried to talk about it, she'd shut down or start an argument about something completely unrelated. The end came on a rainy Tuesday in October. Jennifer sat me down in our living room, the same living room we'd decorated together when we first bought the house, when we still believed in forever, and told me she wanted a divorce. "I'm not happy," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. "I haven't been happy in years. I want out." She wouldn't tell me if there was someone else. She wouldn't give me a real reason. She just wanted out, and Georgia's no-fault divorce laws meant she could have it. The whole thing felt surreal, like watching my life fall apart through thick glass, everything muffled and distant. I moved out 2 months later, taking Tyler with me every other week as per our custody agreement. I found a house in Druid Hills, nothing fancy but comfortable, with a guest house in the back and a yard big enough for Tyler to play in. When the moving truck pulled up, Grace appeared beside it. "I'd like to keep working for you," she said quietly. "If that's okay. I know Miss Jennifer probably wants me to stay with her, but..." She paused, biting her lower lip. "I'd rather work for you." I was touched in a way I couldn't quite explain. "You're an adult now, Grace. The choice is yours. But yes, I'd love for you to stay with me." She smiled then, a rare and beautiful thing, and something warm flickered in my chest that I quickly pushed away. She was 20 years younger than me, the daughter of my mother's housekeeper, a girl I'd known since she was in diapers. Whatever I was feeling was just gratitude, I told myself, just appreciation for her loyalty. Grace moved into the guest house. I threw myself into work, trying to outrun the grief of my failed marriage. Some nights I'd date, bringing home women from the firm or meeting them at the upscale bars in Midtown. Grace would greet them politely, offer them coffee or wine, but I noticed she never smiled at them the way she smiled at me. Once, I brought home a paralegal named Ashley, a blonde with a sharp wit and expensive tastes. Grace's entire demeanor changed. She became cold, almost hostile, serving Ashley's coffee with barely concealed irritation. After Ashley left, I confronted her. "What was that about?" Grace's eyes flashed. "Nothing. It's not my business who you see." "Then why were you acting like that?" She turned away, her shoulders tense. "She's not right for you. And how would you know what's right for me?" But she wouldn't answer, just disappeared into the guest house, leaving me standing there confused and oddly pleased that she cared. I stopped seeing Ashley after that, though I told myself it had nothing to do with Grace's reaction. The darkness came slowly, then all at once. At first, I just felt tired all the time. Then the tiredness became something heavier, something that pressed down on my chest and made it hard to breathe. I stopped going to the gym, stopped meeting friends for drinks, stopped caring about anything except getting through each day. Some mornings I couldn't find a reason to get out of bed. "Depression," my doctor called it. "Situational," he said, as if that made it better. He prescribed medication, suggested therapy. I nodded and threw the pills in a drawer, too proud to admit I needed chemical help to feel human. Grace noticed. Of course she noticed. She started leaving my favorite meals outside my bedroom door when I couldn't face coming to the dining room. She'd knock softly and say, "I made your favorite. Just eat a little, please." She kept the house immaculate, kept Tyler entertained when he visited, kept the world running while I fell apart. One night, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face for reasons I couldn't even articulate, when I heard a soft knock. "Mr. Richardson?" Grace's voice, gentle and worried. "I'm fine," I lied. The door opened anyway. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, looking impossibly young and impossibly wise all at once. "You're not fine," she said quietly, "and that's okay. But I need you to know something." She came closer, sitting on the edge of my bed with a familiarity that should have felt inappropriate but somehow didn't. "I think your spirit is crying out. I think God is trying to tell you something, trying to get your attention. Have you talked to him lately?" I almost laughed. God and I aren't exactly on speaking terms. Maybe that's the problem. Her hand found mine in the darkness, her fingers warm and small. After my mom passed, I was so angry, so lost. I started going to this church near here, Morning Star Fellowship. The pastor there, Pastor Williams, he says things that they reach right into your soul, you know? "Would you come with me? Just once?" I wanted to say no. I'd grown up in church, done the whole Sunday school thing, but it had never really stuck. It felt like ritual without meaning, like going through motions because that's what people did. But something in Grace's voice, something in the way she was looking at me with such hope and such faith, made me nod. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll go." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you. You'll see. God has plans for you, Mr. Richardson. Better plans than you can imagine." She asked me 7 more times over the next 2 weeks before I finally followed through. Each time I made an excuse. Too tired, too busy, not in the mood, and each time she'd just nod and say, "That's okay. The invitation stands." Finally, on a Sunday morning in late November, I dragged myself out of bed and drove with Grace to Morning Star Fellowship. It was a modest building in East Atlanta, nothing like the grand cathedral where my mother used to take me. The congregation was diverse: black, white, Hispanic, Asian, all mixed together in a way that felt authentic rather than performative. The music was loud and joyful, people clapping and swaying, and I felt desperately out of place in my pressed khakis and button-down. Then Pastor Williams began to preach. He was a man in his 60s, with kind eyes and a voice that commanded attention without demanding it. His sermon that day was about the prodigal son, but he framed it in a way I'd never heard before. He talked about the father waiting, watching, hoping. He talked about how God never gives up on us, even when we give up on ourselves. He talked about how sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. Every word felt aimed directly at my heart. My eyes burned, my throat tightened, and then, to my absolute mortification, I started to cry. Not gentle tears, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. Grace's hand found mine, squeezing tight, and she cried with me, and in that moment something inside me that had been locked tight for years finally broke open. After the service, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, unable to drive, just breathing and feeling, and trying to understand what had just happened. "That was meant for you," Grace said softly. "God was speaking right to you." "I've wasted so much time," I whispered. "So many years not paying attention to what really matters." "It's never too late. That's the beautiful thing about Grace, Mr. Richardson. It's never too late." I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw not the girl I'd known since she was a toddler, not my housekeeper, but a young woman with wisdom beyond her years, with a faith that radiated from her like light. "Stop calling me Mr. Richardson," I said. "Call me Michael." She smiled, brilliant and genuine. "Okay, Michael." Something shifted between us in that moment, though neither of us acknowledged it. We started attending church together 3 times a week: Sunday services, Wednesday Bible study, Friday prayer meetings. We'd come home and study scripture at the kitchen table, Grace asking questions that challenged everything I thought I knew, me discovering depth in texts I'd skimmed over for years. Tyler noticed the change in me. "Dad, you seem happier," he said one weekend, looking up from his video game with those perceptive 8-year-old eyes. "I am, buddy. I really am." Grace was 20 years old now, working as my housekeeper but also taking online business administration classes at Georgia State. She had dreams, ambitions. She wanted to open her own event planning company someday. We'd talk about her plans over dinner, which had become a regular thing. Her cooking, us eating together at the table instead of me hiding in my room. One evening, as we were clearing dishes, she said carefully, "Michael, I need to tell you something. I probably shouldn't, but I think it's important you know." My hands stilled. "What is it?" "I've heard Miss Jennifer on the phone sometimes when I go to pick up Tyler. She's talking to a man." I know it's a man because the way she talks, it's different, intimate. I didn't want to say anything because it's not my place, but I thought you should know. The information should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I just felt a distant sadness for what we'd lost, for the marriage that had died long before either of us admitted it. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. Grace bit her lip. "I first noticed it about 6 months before she asked for the divorce." 6 months. So there had been someone else. She'd left me for someone else and never had the courage to admit it. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "I know that wasn't easy." She touched my arm, her hand gentle and warm. "I just want you to be happy. You deserve to be happy." Our eyes met and held, and for a heartbeat, just one, I saw something in her gaze that made my breath catch. Then she pulled away, busying herself with the dishes, and the moment passed, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. As winter gave way to spring, Grace and I fell into an easy rhythm that felt dangerously close to something more than friendship. We'd order takeout and eat it while watching documentaries. We'd debate theology and politics and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She'd leave funny notes on my bathroom mirror to make me smile. I'd buy her favorite coffee creamer without her asking. One night, over Chinese food, she started talking about her past, really talking about it for the first time. "I've never told you about Alabama," she said, picking at her lo mein, "about what it was like before Mom brought us here." "You don't have to," I said gently. "I want to." She took a breath. "My father was a mean drunk. He'd come home and you could just feel the violence rolling off him. He never hit me, but he hit Mom. A lot. I'd hide in my room and cover my ears and pray for it to stop. When Mom finally got the courage to leave, we came here with nothing. Just the clothes we wore and $50. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. And then at school, when I started sophomore year with my Alabama accent, everyone made fun of me, called me hillbilly, redneck, trailer trash. I ate lunch alone every single day for 2 years. I'd go to the library and pretend to read just so no one would see me sitting by myself in the cafeteria. Something fierce and protective rose in my chest. "Grace, I'm so sorry." "I didn't know. How could you? I never told anyone." She looked up at me, her eyes shining. "But being here with you, going to church, finding God, it's been healing. You've been healing." The next day, I made an appointment with the best therapist in Atlanta and told Grace she'd be going. "Michael, I can't afford, I'm paying for it. No arguments. You deserve to work through all of this with someone trained to help." She looked at me with such gratitude, such affection, that I had to look away. I also noticed she rarely smiled, and when I asked her about it, she admitted, "I'm embarrassed about my teeth. They're crooked, and I'm missing one in the back. Kids used to tease me about it, too." The following week, I had her at Atlanta's premier cosmetic dentist, starting a comprehensive treatment plan that would take months but would give her the smile she deserved. Watching her transformation over those months was like watching a flower bloom. The therapy helped her stand straighter, speak more confidently. The dental work gave her a reason to smile more, and when she smiled, she absolutely lit up the room. She started dressing differently, not provocatively, but with more color, more life. She wore her hair down instead of always pulled back. She looked radiant. I tried not to notice, failed completely. Her 21st birthday approached, and I wanted to do something special. She'd mentioned once, offhand, that she'd never had professional photos taken. No senior portraits, no family pictures, nothing. She'd never felt pretty enough, confident enough. I hatched a plan. On her birthday, I told her to dress in her nicest outfit, something she'd wear to a party. She emerged from the guest house in a simple blue dress that made her eyes look like dark honey, looking nervous and beautiful and so young it made my heart ache. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see. First stop, a high-end salon in Buckhead." Her eyes went wide when we pulled up. "Michael, what are we doing?" "Trust me, I'd prearranged everything." The stylist did a deep conditioning treatment, then a keratin smoothing that transformed her dark curls into glossy waves that cascaded down her back. Then we went to a makeup artist who enhanced her natural beauty without making her look overdone. When she finally saw herself in the mirror, her hand flew to her mouth. "Is that really me?" she whispered. "That's you. Always been you. Now everyone else gets to see it." The photo session was at a professional studio in Midtown. The photographer, Marcus, was a friend from college who owed me a favor. He knew exactly what I wanted, portraits that captured Grace's natural beauty and growing confidence. He directed her through different poses, different lighting setups, and with each click of the camera, she became more comfortable, more herself. Near the end, she looked at me standing in the corner, watching. "Marcus, can we get one more shot? With him?" "Of course." She pulled me into the frame, and we stood there together, her leaning slightly against me, both of us smiling genuinely. Marcus captured it perfectly, a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. When the photos came back a week later, Grace went through them with tears streaming down her face. "I've never seen myself like this," she said. "I've never felt beautiful before." "You are beautiful," I said, meaning it more than I'd ever meant anything. Inside and out. She had the photo of us together printed and framed. I noticed it on her bedside table in the guest house, and when I glanced at her phone one day, I saw she'd made it her lock screen. Something warm and terrifying unfurled in my chest. The following month, I had a legal conference in Miami, 4 days of seminars and networking I absolutely couldn't miss. I told Grace I'd be gone and tried not to notice how her face fell. "I'll miss you," she said softly. "I'll be back before you know it." But every night in Miami, my phone would light up with messages from her. "How was your day? Hope the conference is good. Tyler came by for dinner. He says hi." Simple messages that I found myself waiting for. Messages that made hotel rooms in a different city feel less lonely. On the last night, she sent, "House is too quiet without you." I stared at those 5 words for a long time before responding. "I'll be home tomorrow." When I walked through my front door the next evening, exhausted from travel and ready for my own bed, Grace practically ran to me. She threw her arms around me in a hug that lasted just a beat too long, and when she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "I made your favorite," she said. "Homemade carbonara with French wine." She'd set the dining room table like it was a special occasion, lit candles and everything. We ate and talked and laughed, and it felt so much like a date that I had to remind myself it wasn't. Couldn't be. That night, I collapsed into my bed and immediately noticed something. My pillow smelled like her. That combination of her shampoo and perfume and just her. She'd slept in my bed while I was gone. The realization should have bothered me. Instead, I buried my face in the pillow and breathed deeply, and slept better than I had in 4 days. I never mentioned it to her, but I knew, and she probably knew I knew. Sunday services at Morning Star Fellowship became the highlight of my week. Pastor Williams was working through 1 Corinthians, and when he reached chapter 13, the famous love chapter, I felt every word like a physical touch. "Love is patient. Love is kind," Pastor Williams read, his voice filling the sanctuary. "It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs." I'd heard these verses at a dozen weddings, had them embroidered on pillows and printed on greeting cards. But sitting there with Grace beside me, both of us holding our Bibles, her shoulder just barely touching mine, the words became new, alive, urgent. Love doesn't care about age differences. Love doesn't care what society thinks. Love doesn't care about professional positions or economic backgrounds. Love just is. I glanced at Grace and found her looking at me, and in that look, I saw everything I'd been trying to deny for months. She wasn't just my housekeeper. She wasn't just the daughter of my mother's employee. She wasn't just a young woman I was mentoring. She was the person who'd pulled me out of my depression, who'd introduced me to a faith that actually meant something, who made me laugh and think and want to be better, who felt like home in a way my ex-wife never had. She was falling in love with me. God help me, I was falling in love with her too. The realization terrified me. What would people say? A successful lawyer with his housekeeper? A man in his 30s with a woman barely old enough to drink legally? The daughter of my mother's employee, a girl I'd known since she was a child? Every objection my logical lawyer brain could conjure up came flooding in. I'd be judged. She'd be judged. People would assume the worst, that I'd taken advantage of her, groomed her, used my position of power inappropriately. But then I'd remember that night at church, Pastor Williams preaching about how God's ways aren't our ways, how love that honors God doesn't fit into neat societal boxes, how sometimes the path forward requires courage that looks like foolishness to the world. I had to talk to someone. I couldn't keep this inside anymore. The next Wednesday, I stayed after Bible study and asked Pastor Williams if I could speak with him privately. We sat in his small office, surrounded by overflowing bookshelves and faded photographs of mission trips, and I told him everything. The whole impossible, complicated story. He listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Michael, what are you asking me?" he finally said. "I guess I'm asking permission, or approval, or maybe just, I need to know if this is wrong, if I'm wrong to feel what I'm feeling. Are your intentions pure?" "Yes, absolutely." "Do you want to honor God in this relationship?" "More than anything." "Then there's your answer." He leaned forward, his eyes kind but serious. "But Michael, this isn't something I can give you permission for. This is between you and God. You need to pray, really pray. Fast if you need to. Seek His face with everything you have, and He'll give you clarity." I left that meeting with a strange sense of peace, mixed with dread. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't want to do it. Because what if God said no? What if this impossible thing I was feeling was just my own loneliness and trauma, creating an attachment where none should exist? I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror that night, staring at my reflection. "Okay, God," I whispered, "I need you to be really clear on this one. Because I'm about to do something that could change everything, and I need to know it's what you want, not just what I want." The following Friday, I packed a small bag and drove 2 hours north to a quiet retreat center in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'd booked a private cabin for the weekend, told Grace I needed some time alone to think and pray. She'd looked disappointed but understanding. "Whatever you need," she'd said. "I'll be here when you get back." I arrived Friday evening as the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I'd committed to a full 36-hour fast, nothing but water from Saturday morning at 7 until Sunday evening at 7. 36 hours to seek God's face, to beg for clarity, to find out if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life or if I was finally, for the first time, listening to what really mattered. I had no idea that God was about to answer in a way I never could have imagined, and that at 3 o'clock Saturday night, while I knelt on that cabin floor, Grace would be lying awake 2 hours away, having a dream that would change both our lives forever. Saturday morning broke cold and clear over the mountains. I woke at dawn, made myself a simple breakfast of oatmeal and coffee, and at precisely 7 o'clock, I set my phone timer and began my fast. No food, only water. 36 hours to hear from God. I'd brought my Bible, a journal, and nothing else. No laptop, no distractions. Just me and God and a lot of questions that needed answers. The first few hours were easy. I read through the Gospels, taking notes on everything Jesus said about love, about following your heart versus following religious rules. I prayed out loud, pacing the small cabin, asking God to show me clearly if Grace was meant to be in my life as more than just a friend, more than just someone I cared for. By noon, hunger was starting to gnaw at my stomach, but I pushed through it. I'd done fasts before, knew the physical discomfort was part of the process, stripping away the physical to make room for the spiritual. "Lord, I need you to be unmistakable about this," I prayed, my voice echoing in the empty cabin. "If this is wrong, if I'm fooling myself, if I'm about to hurt her or damage her in any way, please stop me. Close this door so completely that I can't possibly misunderstand. But if this is from you, if you've been orchestrating this all along, then show me. Please, I'm begging you to show me." The afternoon stretched long and quiet. I read, I prayed. I sat in the silence and tried to listen for God's voice. Nothing came. Just the sound of wind through the pines outside and the occasional creak of the cabin settling. By evening, doubt was creeping in. Maybe this whole thing was ridiculous. Maybe I was just a middle-aged man having some kind of crisis, projecting feelings onto a young woman who looked up to me as a mentor, nothing more. Maybe God's silence was His answer, a clear no that I was too stubborn to hear. I ate nothing for dinner, just drank water and watched the sun set through the cabin windows, painting the mountains in deep purples and golds. Then I opened my Bible to Proverbs, reading through the passages about wisdom and discernment, asking God to give me both. Exhaustion hit around 9 p.m. The combination of hunger, emotional intensity, and spiritual focus left me drained. I crawled into bed, setting my alarm for early morning, and fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. And then I started dreaming. In the dream, I was standing in my mother's old kitchen in Atlanta, sunlight streaming through the windows the way it always did on Saturday mornings. Everything was vivid, hyper-real. I could smell the coffee brewing, could feel the warmth of the sun on my face. And then I heard her voice. Miguelito. I turned, and there was Rosa Martinez, standing by the stove exactly the way she used to, wearing her favorite apron with the sunflowers on it. She looked younger than she had before her passing, her face unlined by pain or worry, her smile radiant. "Rosa?" My voice came out choked. She opened her arms, and I went to her like I was 7 years old again, letting her embrace me. She smelled like cinnamon and soap, exactly the way I remembered. "Thank you," she said softly, her accent thick but her words clear. "Thank you for taking care of my baby girl. Thank you for seeing her, really seeing her, when the rest of the world looked past her. Rosa, Shh, Miguelito. Listen to me. My Grace, she is in good hands now. The best hands. You take care of her, yes? You love her the way she deserves? You keep her safe until your last breath?" Tears were streaming down my face. "But Rosa, what if I'm too old for her? What if people judge her, judge us? What if—" "Love doesn't listen to the noise of small minds," she said firmly, pulling back to look at me with those dark eyes that were so much like her daughter's. "Love listens only to God, and God brought you two together. You trust that. You trust Him." She hugged me again, so tight I could barely breathe, and then she whispered, "She is your gift. You are hers. Don't waste it worrying about what other people think. Promise me." "I promise," I managed to say. She kissed my forehead the way she used to when I was a child, and then the dream shifted, faded, and I was awake. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering, my face wet with tears. The clock on the nightstand read 3 a.m. exactly. The dream had felt so real, so vivid, that I could still smell Rosa's perfume, could still feel the warmth of her embrace. I stumbled out of bed and dropped to my knees on the cold cabin floor, my entire body shaking. "God, was that you?" I whispered into the darkness. "Was that really her, or just my own mind playing tricks? I need to know. Please, I need to know for certain." I stayed there on my knees, praying with an intensity I'd never experienced before. Words poured out of me, confessions of fear, admissions of love, requests for courage, pleas for clarity. I lost track of time, lost track of everything except this desperate need to hear from God, to know beyond any shadow of doubt what I should do. Half an hour passed, maybe more. I kept my eyes closed, kept praying, and then suddenly, a vision appeared behind my closed eyelids, as clear and vivid as a movie playing on a screen. I saw myself standing in a living room I didn't recognize, wearing a wedding ring I didn't own. And beside me stood Grace, also wearing a ring, and she was glowing with happiness. In our arms was a baby girl with dark curls in my eyes, and we were both staring at this little person like she was the most miraculous thing in the universe. Then I heard a voice, not audible, but so clear it might as well have been. It resonated through my entire being, warm and certain and unmistakable. "This is your wife. This is your daughter. This is my plan for you. Walk in it without fear." The vision lasted maybe 10 seconds, but in those 10 seconds, every doubt I'd had evaporated. Every fear dissolved, every objection crumbled to dust. I collapsed forward, pressing my forehead to the floor, and sobbed, not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief and gratitude and joy. God had answered, not with a maybe, not with a cryptic message I'd have to interpret, but with perfect, beautiful clarity. "Thank you," I whispered over and over. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I don't know how long I stayed there on that floor, crying and praying and thanking God. When I finally looked up, my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. A text message. From Grace. "I can't sleep. I miss you." My hands were trembling as I picked up the phone. It was still 3 a.m., the exact time Rosa had appeared in my dream, the exact time God had given me the vision. I stared at Grace's message, at those 5 simple words, and felt like my heart might burst. "I miss you too," I typed back. "I'll be home tomorrow night." 3 little dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing. "Can't wait." I set the phone down and just breathed, letting the magnitude of what had just happened wash over me. God had confirmed it. Rosa had blessed it. And Grace was awake at 3 in the morning, missing me, thinking about me. This was real. This was happening. This was right. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I stayed on my knees, praying through until dawn. But now my prayers were different. I thanked God for grace, for bringing her into my life. I asked for wisdom to love her well, to honor her, to be the man she deserved. I prayed for my business, for guidance about the partnership that was increasingly troubling my conscience. I prayed for Tyler, for Jennifer, for everyone in my life who might struggle with this unexpected turn of events. Sunday morning came, and I continued my fast. The hunger was intense now, my stomach cramping, my head starting to pound from lack of food. But I pushed through it, reading scripture, journaling everything that had happened, marking this weekend as a turning point in my life. Around midday, something else happened. I was reading through Proverbs, specifically the section about integrity and honest business practices, when that same clear inner voice spoke again. Your work there is finished. It's time to do something that pleases me. You know what I'm calling you to do. I did know. I'd known for months. My law partner, Richard, had been taking cases that made my skin crawl, defending people we both knew were guilty, using legal loopholes to help corporations evade environmental regulations, representing clients whose business practices were exploitative at best. Before my conversion, I justified it as just part of the job. But after starting to study scripture, after learning what God actually said about justice and righteousness and caring for the vulnerable, I couldn't reconcile what we were doing with what I now believed. Okay, I said aloud to the empty cabin. Okay, I hear you. I'll end the partnership. I'll start my own firm, one that actually honors you and how I practice law. I don't know how it'll work financially, but I trust you. Peace flooded through me, the kind of peace that made no logical sense but felt more certain than any logical argument could provide. At 7 p.m. Sunday evening, exactly 36 hours after I'd started, I ended my fast. I'd packed some simple food, crackers, cheese, and apple, and I ate slowly, my stomach too sensitive after the long break to handle much at once. Then I called Grace. "Hey," I said, and just hearing her voice made me smile. "Hey, are you coming home?" "Yeah, I'm packing up now." "Should be there around 9:30. "Perfect. I'll make carbonara with that Parmesan crust you love, and I found a really good French wine at the store. Grace, you don't have to." "I want to. Please, let me take care of you." How could I argue with that? The drive back to Atlanta felt simultaneously endless and too short. I needed time to process everything that had happened, but I was also desperate to see her, to be in the same room with her, to start figuring out how to tell her what God had revealed. When I pulled into my driveway at 9:45, the house was lit up, warm and welcoming. Before I could even grab my bag from the back seat, the front door opened and Grace came running out. She threw her arms around me and I caught her, lifting her slightly off the ground, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the rightness of her in my arms. "I missed you," I said, and I saw her eyes widen slightly. I'd never said it before, never admitted it out loud. "I missed you too," she whispered. We went inside, and true to her word, she'd prepared an elaborate dinner. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, soft music playing in the background. We sat down to eat, and I realized I was starving, not just physically, but for her company, her smile, her presence across the table from me. "So, how was the retreat?" she asked, twirling pasta on her fork. "Intense, powerful, life-changing, honestly." She leaned forward, interested. "Tell me." I told her about the fasting, about spending 36 hours in prayer seeking God's guidance about some major decisions I needed to make. I didn't tell her yet what those decisions were. That conversation needed to wait a bit longer. Then she set down her fork, her expression becoming serious. "Michael, I need to tell you something. Saturday night, I had the most vivid dream. My mom was there. I mean really there, not dream fuzzy but clear as day. She told me I was going to be very happy, that God has a plan for my life, and that everything would happen in His perfect timing. She said I just needed to trust." My fork clattered against my plate. "What time was this dream?" I woke up right after and checked my phone. It was exactly 3 in the morning. That's when I texted you. I was crying, but they were happy tears, you know. It felt so real, like she was really visiting me. 3 a.m. The exact moment Rosa had appeared in my dream. The exact moment God had given me the vision. "Grace!" I started, but my voice caught. "What?" I had a dream too. At 3 a.m. Your mother was there. I paused, overwhelmed by the enormity of it. She told me to take care of you, to love you, to keep you safe until my last breath. Grace's hand flew to her mouth, tears instantly filling her eyes. She said that? And then God showed me something. A vision. He showed me us, together, married, holding our baby. And he told me I had to stop, had to swallow past the lump in my throat. He told me you're supposed to be my wife. The silence that followed felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Grace stood up from her chair, came around the table, and before I knew what was happening, she'd climbed onto my lap, her arms around my neck, crying into my shoulder. I've been in love with you for 2 years, she sobbed. Since I was 19. I tried so hard not to be. Tried to just be grateful you let me stay. Tried to keep my feelings hidden because I thought you could never see me as anything but that little girl you've known forever. But I couldn't help it. Every day I fell more in love with you, and every day it hurt more because I thought it was impossible. I held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head, and felt my own tears start to fall. I was so scared, I admitted. Scared of what people would think, scared I'd damage you somehow, scared I was just a messed up guy projecting his own needs onto someone who depended on him. But God made it clear, Grace, unmistakably clear. This isn't wrong. This is his plan. She pulled back to look at me, her face wet with tears, her eyes searching mine. Are you sure? Because I need you to be absolutely sure. I can't handle it if you change your mind, if you wake up one day and regret this. I cupped her face in my hands, wiping her tears with my thumbs. I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life. I love you, Grace Martinez. I want to marry you, build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and thank God for bringing you into my life. And I promise you, before God and your mother's memory, that I will spend every single day proving to you that you made the right choice in loving me back. And then I kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was 2 years of suppressed longing finally breaking free. 2 people who'd been denying what they felt finally admitting the truth. She kissed me back with equal intensity, her fingers threading through my hair, her body pressed against mine, and I felt desire surge through me so strongly that I almost forgot every principle I'd been trying to live by. Almost. I pulled back, both of us breathing hard, and rested my forehead against hers. We should stop, I said, my voice rough. Why? She whispered, and I could hear the want in her voice, the invitation. Because I respect you too much to do this the wrong way. We're going to do this right, Grace. We're going to honor God in this relationship, which means we wait. We get married first, and then, I had to take a shaky breath, and then we'll have a lifetime for everything else. She looked at me with such love, such respect, such admiration that I nearly changed my mind. But I knew this was important. Not because physical intimacy was wrong, but because waiting, choosing to honor God and each other by doing things in the right order, would make everything that came after even more meaningful. How long do we have to wait? She asked, a hint of playfulness in her tears. How about 45 days? Let's talk to Pastor Williams tomorrow, start premarital counseling, and plan a wedding for midsummer. 45 days, she repeated, smiling through her tears. I can wait 45 days for forever. We sat there for a long time, just holding each other, occasionally kissing but keeping it under control, talking about everything and nothing. She told me more about being in love with me for 2 years, about the jealousy she'd felt with Ashley, about how sleeping in my bed while I was gone had made her feel close to me, even though we were apart. I knew you did that, I admitted. I could smell your perfume on my pillow, and I loved it. I'd bury my face in it and pretend you were there. She laughed, a sound of pure joy. We're ridiculous. We're in love. There's a difference. Eventually, reluctantly, I walked her back to the guest house, kissed her goodnight at the door, a kiss that threatened to undo all my resolve, and forced myself to walk away. I barely slept that night. Too much excitement, too much joy, too much anticipation for everything that was about to change. Monday morning, we went to see Pastor Williams together. I held Grace's hand as we explained everything, the dreams, the visions, the confirmation from God, our desire to get married quickly. Pastor Williams listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about our relationship, our intentions, our understanding of what marriage meant. Then he smiled, a wide, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "I'd be honored to perform your wedding ceremony," he said. "And you know what? I'm not even surprised. I've been watching you two together for months now, seeing how you look at each other during services, how you pray for each other, how you care for each other. I've been praying that God would open both your eyes to what was right in front of you. I'm thrilled he finally did." We scheduled premarital counseling sessions for every week until the wedding. We discussed scripture passages about marriage, talked through potential challenges, prepared for the reality of joining our lives together. Pastor Williams was thorough but encouraging, and by the end of our sessions, I felt even more confident that we were making the right choice. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind. We decided to keep it small, just close friends and family. Tyler was thrilled, having already loved Grace like a big sister. Jennifer was less enthusiastic, making thinly veiled comments about inappropriate relationships and taking advantage, but I didn't let her negativity touch me. I knew the truth. God knew the truth. That was enough. We got married on a Saturday in June at Morning Star Fellowship. Grace wore a simple white dress that made her look like an angel, her hair down in those glossy waves, her smile radiant. I wore a navy suit and tried not to cry as she walked down the aisle toward me, her eyes never leaving mine. Pastor Williams kept the ceremony short but meaningful, reminding us that marriage was a sacred covenant, a picture of God's love for his people, a daily choice to serve and honor each other. When he pronounced us husband and wife and told me I could kiss my bride, I did so with my whole heart, and the small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. At the reception, held in the church fellowship hall with simple decorations but lots of love, Tyler gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. "Grace has been like family since I was little," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "And now she actually is family. Dad, you picked good. I'm really happy for you guys." I was going to make it through the whole day without crying, but that ended it. I stood up, pulled my son into a hug, and thanked God for the 1,000th time for bringing all the right people into my life. We left for our honeymoon the following week, first to Dubai, that gleaming city of impossible architecture and blend of ancient tradition with cutting-edge modernity. We rode camels in the desert at sunset, explored spice markets that smelled like 1,000 different worlds, ate incredible food, and marveled at how God had brought us from grief and loneliness to this place of joy and anticipation. Then we flew to Israel, to the Holy Land, to walk where Jesus had walked. Jerusalem was everything I'd imagined and more, ancient and alive, sacred and chaotic, a city where history pressed in on all sides. We visited the Western Wall, the Garden of Gethsemane, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We prayed and wept and felt the presence of God in a way that was almost overwhelming. And then, on our last day in Israel, we went to the Jordan River, to the place where Jesus had been baptized by John the Baptist 2,000 years ago. Standing in that water with Grace, recommitting our lives to God as a married couple, being baptized together by a local pastor who barely spoke English but whose faith was unmistakable, it felt like the perfect culmination of everything we'd been through. "This is where it all started," Grace whispered as we stood in the river afterward, water dripping from our clothes, holding each other. "Jesus' public ministry, changing everything, showing the world what love really looks like. And this is where our life together really starts," I said, "following him, wherever he leads." We flew home renewed, refreshed, more in love than ever, and ready to face whatever challenges awaited us. And there would be challenges. I knew that. The whispers had already started. The gossip about how we'd really been together for years, speculation that I'd been unfaithful to Jennifer with Grace, judgmental comments about our age difference and professional relationship. But standing in our bedroom, watching my wife brush her hair before bed on our first night back home, I couldn't bring myself to care what anyone else thought. "I have a confession," Grace said, catching my eye in the mirror. "Oh? When you would travel for work, I used to sleep in your bed. I'd hug your pillow and pretend it was you." I came up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist. "I know. I could always smell your perfume on my pillow afterward, and I loved it. I'd fall asleep breathing it in." She turned in my arms, her eyes soft. "We wasted so much time being afraid." "No," I said firmly. "We waited for God's timing. There's a difference. Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to happen. She kissed me then, and this time there was no reason to pull back, no need to restrain ourselves. We were married. This was right. This was blessed. And as we fell into bed together for the first time as husband and wife, I thanked God one more time for His perfect plan, for His perfect timing, and for the perfect woman He'd brought into my life when I needed her most. The morning after we returned from our honeymoon, reality set in with the sharp clarity of a bell ringing. I woke up with Grace's head on my chest, her dark hair spilled across my shoulder, and for a moment, I just lay there feeling grateful. Then I remembered the conversation I needed to have, the decision I'd committed to making during that weekend fast in the mountains. It was time to end my partnership with Richard. Grace stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and when she saw me looking at her, she smiled that brilliant smile that still took my breath away. "Good morning, husband," she said softly. "Good morning, wife." I kissed her forehead. "I need to tell you something. A decision I made while I was praying at the retreat." She propped herself up on one elbow, suddenly alert. "What is it?" "I'm leaving the firm, ending the partnership with Richard. I can't keep doing work that goes against everything we believe in, everything God's been teaching me. I need to start my own practice, one that actually honors Him." I expected concern, maybe even fear about the financial uncertainty. Instead, Grace's face lit up. "I think that's wonderful," she said. "I've seen how stressed you get after meetings with Richard, how troubled you look when you come home from certain cases. You should absolutely do this. It's going to be hard at first. We might struggle financially for a while until I build up a client base." She took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. "We'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is, right? Facing the hard stuff together and trusting God to provide." Her faith humbled me. Here was a woman who'd grown up with nothing, who'd known real poverty and hardship, and she wasn't afraid of financial uncertainty because she trusted God more than money. "I love you," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "I love you too. Now go tell Richard. The sooner you do it, the sooner we can start this new chapter." Monday morning, I walked into the sleek downtown office I'd shared with Richard for 8 years and asked him for a meeting. He knew immediately from my expression what was coming. "You're leaving," he said, not a question but a statement. "I am. I need to practice law in a way that aligns with my values, and I don't think I can do that here anymore." Richard leaned back in his expensive leather chair, studying me with eyes that had grown cold over the years I'd known him. "This is about that religious phase you're going through, isn't it? You found God, and suddenly you're too good for the work that's been paying your bills?" I refused to take the bait. "This isn't about being better than anyone. It's about being true to what I believe. I'll buy out my share of the partnership according to the terms we established. I'll transition my clients responsibly, but yes, I'm done." "And what are you going to do? Hang up a shingle and hope for the best?" "Michael, you're making a huge mistake. The legal market is saturated. You'll be starting from scratch, competing with firms that have established reputations and deep pockets for marketing." "Maybe, but I'd rather struggle doing something I believe in than prosper doing something that makes me feel hollow inside." He shook his head, a mixture of contempt and pity on his face. "Well, good luck with that. You'll need it." The buyout took 3 weeks to finalize. 3 weeks of tense negotiations, lawyers reviewing contracts, accountants calculating my share of the assets. When it was finally done, I walked out of that office for the last time with a check that would cover expenses for maybe 6 months if we were careful, and absolutely no idea what came next except a bone-deep certainty that I'd done the right thing. Grace was waiting for me at home when I got there, and I found her in what had been my home office, armed with paint samples and a measuring tape. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Converting this into a proper office for your new practice. I figured we could use the guest house for storage and turn this into your workspace. What do you think? Navy walls or charcoal gray?" I pulled her into my arms, overwhelmed by her support, her optimism, her willingness to jump into this uncertain future with both feet. "I think you're incredible," I said. "And charcoal gray. Definitely charcoal gray." We spent the next month transforming that room into a professional office space. Grace had an eye for design I never would have guessed. She found furniture at estate sales, arranged everything to maximize the small space, even created a waiting area in our front hallway that looked warm and welcoming rather than makeshift. She'd completed her business administration degree online, and now she threw herself into setting up the operational side of things, filing the LLC paperwork, getting our business licenses, setting up accounting systems, creating a simple but professional website. "I know I was supposed to be just the housekeeper," she said one evening as we worked side by side organizing files. "But I'd really like to be your office manager, your receptionist, your partner in this, if you'll have me." "Grace, you were never just anything. And yes, I would be honored to have you work with me. In fact, I can't imagine doing this with anyone else." She beamed, and in that moment, I saw not the young woman I'd taken care of, but an equal partner with skills and intelligence and drive that complemented my own. We officially opened Richardson Law in September, nearly 3 months after our wedding. The first week, we had exactly 0 clients. The second week, 1, a referral from Pastor Williams, an elderly woman from church who needed help with a will. The third week, nothing again. Grace never wavered. Every morning she'd dress professionally, sit at the reception desk we'd set up in our hallway, and answer the phone with such warmth and competence that I half believed we were actually busy. She'd use the quiet time to research marketing strategies, reaching out to community organizations, networking with other small businesses, creating a presence for us at local events. "It takes time to build trust," she'd say whenever I expressed frustration. "People need to know who you are before they'll hire you. We just need to be patient." But patience was expensive. By November, we'd burned through half my buyout money and had only a handful of clients, mostly small cases, wills, and simple contracts that didn't generate much income. I started lying awake at night, doing mental math, wondering if Richard had been right, if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then one morning in early December, Grace came into my office with tears streaming down her face. My heart dropped. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" She nodded, unable to speak, and just handed me something. A pregnancy test, 2 clear pink lines. "We're having a baby," she finally managed to whisper. I stared at that test, at those 2 lines, and suddenly I was back in that cabin in the mountains, seeing the vision God had given me. Grace and me, holding our daughter, both of us wearing wedding rings. This was it. This was the confirmation that we were exactly where we were supposed to be. I pulled Grace onto my lap, holding her tight, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. "God's timing," I said. "It's always perfect, even when we can't see it. Michael, we can barely afford ourselves. How are we going to afford a baby? The same way we're going to make this business work. We're going to trust God and do our best, and somehow it's going to be okay." I believed it when I said it. God would make a way. He always had. What I didn't expect was how he would do it. The following week, a woman named Patricia Chen walked into our makeshift office. She was in her 50s, well-dressed, and she had the bearing of someone used to being taken seriously. Grace greeted her warmly, offered her coffee, and ushered her into my office. "Mr. Richardson, I've been asking around about lawyers in the area who have a reputation for integrity," Patricia began. "Your name kept coming up. Specifically, Pastor Williams at Morning Star Fellowship spoke very highly of you. That's kind of him. What can I help you with?" "I'm the director of Midtown Community Center, a nonprofit that serves underprivileged families. We've been in operation for 15 years, but we've had some legal issues come up. Contract disputes with vendors, some employment matters, potential litigation from a former board member. We need a lawyer who will be honest with us, who won't overcharge a nonprofit, and who actually cares about the community we serve." "Are you that lawyer?" I looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, at the opportunity she was offering. And I thought about Grace in the next room, about the baby growing inside her, about how God had promised to provide. "I am," I said. "Let me tell you what I think we should do." The Midtown Community Center became my anchor client. The work was complex enough to be challenging, meaningful enough to be fulfilling, and paid enough to keep us afloat. More importantly, Patricia was connected to other nonprofit directors, community organizers, and small business owners who needed affordable legal services. Slowly, through word of mouth, our practice began to grow. By the time Grace was showing around 5 months pregnant, we had a steady stream of clients. Not enough to get rich, but enough to pay our bills and start saving for the baby. Grace worked right up until she was 8 months pregnant, greeting clients with her growing belly and infectious enthusiasm, making everyone feel welcome and cared for. We'd go to church every Sunday, and people would approach us with congratulations mixed with barely concealed judgment. We heard the whispers, that we must have been together for years, that I'd probably cheated on Jennifer with Grace, that the age difference was inappropriate, that I was taking advantage of her naivety. One Sunday after service, an older woman from the congregation actually approached us directly. "You know, people are talking," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "They're saying this relationship started long before your divorce was final. They're saying you're fooling this poor girl." Grace, who was usually gentle and accommodating, drew herself up to her full height, which was considerable with her pregnant belly, and looked the woman directly in the eye. "Ma'am, with all due respect, people can talk all they want. My husband and I know the truth. God knows the truth. And we don't owe anyone else an explanation for the love we share or the life we're building. If you have concerns about our relationship, I suggest you take them up with God in prayer rather than spreading gossip in His house." The woman sputtered and walked away, and I looked at my wife with renewed admiration. "Where did that come from?" I asked. "I'm tired of people assuming the worst about us," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We did everything right. We honored God, we waited, we got married before we ever even slept together, and still people want to make us the villains in their story. I'm done apologizing for being happy." I kissed her forehead. "I love you, and you're absolutely right. We know the truth. That's all that matters." But it stung. I'd be lying if I said the judgment didn't hurt. I'd spent my whole life being respectable, doing things the right way, and now people assume the worst about me simply because I'd fallen in love with someone unexpected. There were nights I'd lie awake wondering if I'd damaged Grace's reputation, if I'd made her life harder by loving her. Then she'd roll over in bed, place my hand on her swollen belly, and let me feel our daughter kicking. And I'd remember, God had orchestrated this. Every step, every moment, every impossible turn that had led us here. Our daughter arrived on a warm evening in June, exactly 1 year after our wedding. Grace's labor was long and difficult, 18 hours of increasing pain that broke my heart to witness. I held her hand, wiped her forehead, prayed with her between contractions, and marveled at her strength. When Isabella Rose Richardson finally entered the world at 2:47 a.m., screaming her indignation at being removed from her comfortable home, I was utterly undone. She was perfect, tiny and red and wrinkled, and absolutely perfect. Dark hair like her mother, eyes that would probably turn brown like mine, and a grip that clutched my finger with surprising strength. Grace was exhausted but radiant, holding our daughter against her chest, and I stood there watching them and remembered that vision in the cabin, this exact scene, predicted by God a year before it happened. Promised, delivered, perfect. "She's beautiful," Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's so beautiful, Michael." "She's both of you," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "The best of both of us." Being parents changed everything and nothing. The sleepless nights were brutal. The constant worry about whether we were doing it right was exhausting. But watching Isabella grow, seeing her smile for the first time, hearing her laugh, it made every hard moment worth it. Grace proved to be an incredible mother, patient and loving, and somehow still managing to help run the law practice from home. We hired a part-time receptionist so Grace could focus on Isabella, but she still handled the bookkeeping, still managed our social media presence, still networked at community events when she could. The practice continued to grow. By Isabella's first birthday, we'd hired an associate attorney and expanded our services. We were specializing in community law, helping nonprofits, representing small businesses, doing pro bono work for families who couldn't afford legal help. It wasn't making us wealthy, but we were comfortable. We were doing meaningful work, and every night I went to bed with a clear conscience. Tyler, now 11 years old, was an amazing big brother to Isabella. He'd come over on weekends and play with her for hours, making her giggle with silly faces and goofy voices. Watching my son bond with my daughter, seeing the family we'd created despite all the obstacles and judgment, filled me with gratitude so profound I could barely contain it. 2 years after Isabella was born, Pastor Williams asked if Grace and I would be willing to give our testimony at church. He wanted us to share our story, how we'd met, how we'd fallen in love, how we'd honored God in our relationship. Grace was nervous. What if people judge us? What if they don't believe we really waited? Then that's on them, I said. But I think there are people who need to hear our story. People who think they have to compromise their values to find love, or who think following God means missing out on happiness. Let's tell them the truth. The Sunday we gave our testimony, the sanctuary was packed. We stood at the front together, Grace holding my hand, and I started talking. I told them about my depression, about hitting rock bottom, about how this young woman I'd known for years had pulled me out of darkness by simply inviting me to church. I talked about falling in love with someone unexpected, about being afraid of judgment, but more afraid of ignoring what God was clearly showing me. Then Grace spoke, her voice steady and clear. I fell in love with Michael when I was 19 years old, she said, and I heard gasps ripple through the congregation. For 2 years, I loved him in silence, believing he could never see me as anything more than his housekeeper's daughter. But God had other plans, and when Michael finally told me he loved me too, we made a choice. We chose to honor God by waiting. We didn't sleep together. We didn't even live together until after we were married. We did a fast-track engagement, yes, but we also did premarital counseling. We prayed. We sought godly counsel. And we waited until our wedding night to fully express our love physically. You could hear a pin drop in that sanctuary. I know people have talked, Grace continued, her voice growing stronger. I know they've assumed we were together longer than we were, that we must have compromised our values somewhere along the way. And you know what? I understand why they'd think that. In today's world, what we did seems almost impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was just hard. And it was worth it. Every moment of waiting, every time we had to restrain ourselves, every prayer we prayed for strength, it made our wedding night more meaningful, our marriage stronger, our foundation more solid. I took over then, telling them about the vision God had given me, about how He'd shown me our daughter before she was even conceived, about how every promise He'd made had come true exactly as He'd said it would. Here's what I want you to understand, I said, looking out at the faces staring back at us. Following God doesn't mean your life will be easy. It doesn't mean people won't judge you. It doesn't mean you won't face obstacles and doubts and moments where you question everything. But it does mean that if you listen to Him, if you trust Him, if you're willing to wait for His timing and walk in His ways, He will give you something better than you could ever imagine for yourself. But after the service, person after person came up to us, many with tears in their eyes. Young couples thanked us for showing them that sexual purity before marriage was still possible and still worth it. Older people apologized for judging us, for assuming the worst. One woman, probably in her 40s, grabbed both our hands and said, "I needed to hear this. I've been dating someone, and we've been compromising our values because we figured everyone does. But you've shown me we don't have to." Thank you. Pastor Williams pulled us aside afterward, his eyes shining with pride. "You two have no idea how many people needed to hear that," he said. "In a world that tells us purity is old-fashioned and waiting is impossible, you lived proof that it's not only possible but beautiful. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share." Driving home that day, Grace leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad we did that," she said softly. "I'm glad our story can help other people." "Me too. Though I never imagined this is where we'd end up when you first invited me to church," she laughed. "God's full of surprises, isn't He? The best kind." Now, as I sit here in my home office, watching Grace play with Isabella in the backyard through my window, I find myself overwhelmed with gratitude. It's been 5 years since that weekend fast in the mountains, 5 years since God showed me His plan for my life, and every single day has been better than I could have orchestrated for myself. The law practice is thriving. We've hired 3 more attorneys and moved into actual office space downtown, though I still sometimes work from home to be near my family. We're making a real difference in our community, fighting for people who need someone in their corner, using our skills to serve rather than just to profit. Grace completed a master's degree in business administration and now runs the operational side of the firm. She's brilliant at it, and our staff adores her. She's no longer just my wife or just the receptionist. She's my partner in every sense of the word, and I trust her judgment implicitly. Tyler is 16 now, a good kid with a strong faith of his own. He's talking about following me into law, about wanting to use his life to help people. I couldn't be prouder. Isabella is 3, full of energy and questions and the kind of joy that only small children possess. Every time I look at her, I remember that vision. God showing me this exact child before she existed, and I'm reminded that He keeps His promises. Jennifer remarried a couple of years ago. I've made peace with how our marriage ended, forgiven her for the deception, chosen to believe that everything worked out the way it was supposed to. Tyler splits his time between our homes, and while it's not perfect, it's workable. The judgment from others has largely faded. We proved through our consistency, our commitment, our obvious love for each other, that our relationship was genuine and godly. The people who wanted to believe the worst have moved on to other scandals. The people who matter stood by us. But here's what I want you to understand. What I need you to hear if you're listening to this story and seeing parts of yourself in it. God's plans are better than yours, always, even when they don't make sense, even when they scare you, even when they require you to face judgment and criticism and doubt. When I was 34 years old, drowning in depression, believing my best years were behind me, I had no idea that God was preparing something beautiful. I had no idea that the young woman bringing me coffee and keeping my house clean would become the love of my life. I had no idea that losing everything, my marriage, my career trajectory, my comfortable life, would actually be the path to finding everything that truly mattered. I thought I needed status. I needed a certain type of wife from the right background. I needed professional success and social acceptance and all the external markers of having made it. What I actually needed was faith, real faith, the kind that says, God, I don't understand this, but I trust you. The kind that waits when everything in you wants to rush ahead. The kind that chooses purity, even when it's difficult, honesty, even when it costs you, integrity, even when it's expensive. What I actually needed was love, not the sanitized, socially acceptable version that looks good on Christmas cards, but the real, messy, surprising kind that shows up in unexpected packages, that requires courage to accept, that transforms you from the inside out. If you're watching this and you're struggling, if you're depressed like I was, if you're lonely, if you're wondering if God even sees you, if you're afraid to follow the path He's showing you because of what others might think, please hear me. He sees you. He has plans for you, plans that are better than anything you could design for yourself. But you have to be willing to trust Him. You have to be willing to wait for His timing instead of forcing your own. You have to be willing to look foolish in the eyes of the world in order to be wise in the eyes of God. Grace and I didn't do everything perfectly. We made mistakes, had doubts, struggled with fear and uncertainty, but we kept coming back to one central truth. God brought us together, and if we honored Him in our relationship, He would honor us. And He did. Beyond our wildest dreams, He did. So here's my challenge to you. Whatever God is asking you to do, whether it's ending a relationship that's wrong for you, starting one that scares you, making a career change that seems risky, choosing purity when everyone around you is compromising, standing firm in your faith when it costs you socially, do it. Trust Him. Take the leap. The people who matter will support you. The people who judge you weren't really in your corner anyway. And God, who sees everything, who knows everything, who loves you more than you can possibly comprehend, will never let you down. Grace didn't just save my life that day she invited me to church. She showed me what it looks like to have faith that moves mountains, to love without condition, to trust God even when circumstances look impossible. And together, we've built a life that honors Him, serves others, and fills us with joy every single day. That's what I want for you. Not my specific story. You'll have your own unique journey. But this same experience of surrendering to God's plan and discovering it's more beautiful than anything you could have imagined. Let me leave you with this prayer, the same prayer I prayed in that cabin 5 years ago, the prayer that changed my life. God, I surrender. I don't know what I'm doing, but You do. I don't know how this works out, but You do. Show me Your plan. Give me courage to follow it, even when I'm scared. Help me trust Your timing, even when I want to rush ahead. And please, please let me see clearly what You're trying to show me. Remove the scales from my eyes. Open my heart to possibilities I've been too blind or too proud to see. I'm Yours. My life is Yours. Lead me where You want me to go. Amen. If you pray that prayer with genuine faith, get ready. Your life is about to change in ways you never expected. And 5 years from now, you might find yourself telling your own impossible story of how God took your brokenness and turned it into something beautiful. Trust Him. Wait for His timing. Honor Him in your choices. And watch Him move mountains on your behalf.